Gurmagot, Las Concorda. First of all, Taoiseach, on a personal level, I want to wish you well. I outlined during the week that while I don't have a problem with some people in Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil, I do have a problem with some of the agenda that's being pushed in this country at the moment. And I'm not the person that is negative on everything. During the week, as you would be well familiar with, in relation to Darragh O'Brien, who brought in the sewerage scheme for towns that had no Irish water, who brought in basically the grant for refurbishment of rural houses. I welcome that. And Minister Rabbitte, in fairness to her, who helped in the cancer hospital in Galway, I welcome that. But there is a big problem, Taoiseach, about the way this country is going, in my opinion, because decisions that are being made are basically pulverising and decimating certain aspects in rural Ireland, and we will not stand for that, and it's going to cause abandonment. I am the very person and would always stand up when it's not popular, when the likes of the cap was being brought forward, and I stood with your minister and I supported it. But the cap isn't just the only thing that will keep farmers in rural Ireland going. The one thing I would ask you as Taoiseach is get rid of this word about culling the herd. Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil always stood for rural Ireland, one time, the farmer. They always stood for Middle Ireland, but you seem to basically have abandoned them. And don't do it the sly way that's trying to be done at the moment, where a cow was 2 cows to the hectare. Now if she makes a bit more, it's 1.6 of them. That's a sly way of doing things. I look at the likes of the sheep farmers on the mountains, the type of, a derogatory type of extra grant they are getting. And then Minister Ryan talks about, the way forward in climate and the way forward in designation and all of that. Well, ironically enough, this great scheme of acres, and there was some good parts of it, I'm not saying it was all bad, but the most farmer that was in a designated area couldn't put anything into the riparian zone. So they lost €3,000. Now, if that's good, and you're talking about climate, I'm a Dutchman. And then when you talk about, I listened to Minister Ryan, and to be honest about it, I was fraud on some of the things that came out. Do you realise as a government this minute that by signing up to what you're signing up to in Europe, and by your future forestry policy, that 1 million acres, 1 million hectares, sorry, not acres, 1 million hectares will be taken out of the equation? And I will explain that to you. When you talk about signing up to 30% under the new nature restoration, you're talking about farmers that farm land, that went out and shored it, that made them viable in rural areas across the west, northwest, Midlands and the southwest, who shored it with their bare hands and a shovel. And now you're telling them, well, you better re-wet that. And are ye as a government proud, and I've heard it referred to earlier, are ye proud that our state body, when it comes to forestry, we're in at the Agricultural Committee last Tuesday, and they talked and they said that they are going to get a private entity which is outside this country, and they are going, the big word a few months ago was that there was 100,000 hectares going to be planted over the next 30 years by them. And they are getting a private entity, a vulture fund, to call it simple and straight. And you should have learned enough about them in the housing to buy the land. And our state forestry company that owns 440,000 hectares are now going to become managers of that. Is that the coalition party that ye want? Or do you even know about it? Probably not. The Department of Agriculture are aware of it. It was announced the other night. The Minister is aware of it. And when you talk about the Fine Gael and the Fianna Fáil, that was always the farmer's friend one time. And when they hear that, what's that going to do to the small farmer in the west, the northwest or the southwest or even in the Midlands? For the 5 or 10 or 15 acre farm, they won't be able to compete. So what will happen? This is the consequences. And in fairness to Deputy Harkin, she spoke earlier on so well about balanced regional development. And whatever about the balanced regional development, we want to be able to live where we are first. We want to be able to work the land where we are. But with the proposals that's been agreed by ye in government of 100,000 hectares in forestry, and with 850,000 acres in re-wetting, a lot of that land, some of it is in Listowel where dairy farmers are working. Does that give confidence to a farmer? And the fear I have at the moment, and have a look at the stats, over the last 10 years in Europe, we have lost 40% of livestock farmers. That's the facts. It's not me saying it. You can Google it up. And what we want to do is encourage people farming in rural Ireland in a sustainable way. I'm not talking about destroying rivers or anything. But what I am saying is you don't drive them off the land. And with the policies that's being pursued, there are certain parts of the country that's going to be worse affected. The West, the Northwest, and the Southwest, and parts of the Midlands. And they will be the ones where the land won't be as good a quality, so these vultures are going to buy it. And what Quilcha have said is they're going to be the managers. So if you look at the stats for sale of land, every 1 and 2 acres, they'll be competing for it. How is any family farm to survive in that? Or how will anyone go forward? And you talked about, Minister Ryan, you talked earlier on about transport. And yes, there is some new rural links. I don't deny that. But I looked this morning, the roads were bad. Could I come up here and go down tonight? No. But can any minister, and I looked at the amount of ministers, 12 I think out of the 15, there's 2 capitals in Ireland now, Cork and Dublin, because 12 out of the 15 are from there. There's a Dart, a Lewis, a taxi or a bus to bring any of you home in Dublin tonight. But for us, we were forced to bring a car because we couldn't come home. And you talk about transport, and you talk about climate, and the low-hanging fruit for anyone was last year, and to be honest, you're doing good at the beginning. You announced there was a free ticket for every youngster going to school. And what you do then? Leave half them without tickets, and there was meal murder, and there still is. That's the problem. So if you want to do good and talk about your climate, take the low-hanging fruit. Make sure every child has a bus, the way that mammy and their SUV hasn't to be bringing them to school. That's what I call basically going forward and doing things in a normal, rational way, rather than this wild talk that we're talking about. And when I talk about wild talk, today we heard all about the amount of turbines that's going to fly around this country to every coast. There's a reality here, and I know that there's a planning bill coming forward, that every investor that was going to the west of Ireland walked away because they were afraid of the planning up to now. Now we're not going to magic them turbines within the next 2 or 3 years overnight. And second of all, there's these photo ops of battery storage, and I have nothing against battery storage. But there's a reality that they do about 2 hours. And in the last month, the wind didn't blow. So I don't know how the Jesus were going to power them from that, from the wind, if the wind doesn't blow. But I would urge you to look at the low-hanging fruit, the likes of the school buses. I agree with the solar, 100%. And in fairness, there's good opportunities coming there. And we need to go forward as best we can. I would ask you as Taoiseach, that unfortunately out there, when you talk to people on the ground, in the farming community at the moment, they don't know where they're going. They don't know, is it on nitrates? They don't know, is there going to be culls of cows? You'll see on the Farmer's Journal, so much per cow. When you have a situation of no decisions, you leave a vacuum, and you leave speculation, and you leave communities that contributed to this country, something like 12.5 to 13 billion in the last year, the agricultural sector has contributed. And when you leave them in that situation, first of all, there'll be no machinery bought. Second of all, they won't be spending money because they don't know where they're going. You need your roadmap. You need your path. You need the future for your children. And we have to live in those rural areas. The land mightn't be as good. The roads mightn't be as good, but we're proud of where we're from. We're able to farm that land. Not someone come along and tell us that we have to bring the water level up to a certain height and that we have to basically abandon it. Because what will happen? We'll drive people into the cities and the towns, and we have no houses at the moment. We're not going magicking them up. I would ask you as Taoiseach in your next 2.5 years to listen to what I have said. If there's something good, I always go out and I'm man enough to say it's good. I'm not the opposition person that will criticise something. But I see what's happening on the ground. And I would urge you as Taoiseach for the next 2.5 years to think of those people, to think that there's more than Dublin or Cork, to think that there's a Donegal and a Kerry and a Galway and a Louth and all these parts around this country. And yes, there is rural regeneration and things like that, and I welcome that. I'm not a naysayer, but the bigger picture, we're being forgot. And all I fear is that the farmers will abandon the land. And if Europe continues with the food policy they're on, we'll be importing from Brazil and we'll be like the birds in the nest with our mouths open trying to get it. That's not the future I want. That's not the future that will be a good Europe. Thank you.